Hey guys, Brian delivers you the goods here. I'm returning to you again for another video, and I hope you enjoyed this review for, well, not review, but an end of the year video, actually, to be precise, because I, uh, was meaning to get to this video last night, but I had to watch another movie to see what I thought of it, and it was the Omni Loop, and it did make the cut at the last minute, so this is for OK to Man Movies of 2024 list that I will be going through all 26 movies up to all the way down to one to let you know what I thought of each movie as I watched through it this year. So I'm going to discuss what I watched for numbers 26 to 1, what's on my list, and let you know my thoughts on the OK to Man Movies of 2024 list. So let's dive into this special video today. Now, we only have 4 weeks, 4 weeks left of 2024, and then we're going into the new year 2025, which I can't wait to see how 2025 unfolds for music, mostly because it looks like it's going to be a very good year for music. Um, Number 26 is The First Omen. Now, I did remember watching this when I had to review it back in July. I was a little late to the party for that review. It was July or August, somewhere around there, but I was starting to catch up a lot more quickly during the rest of the year, and that's what I wanted to do, is try to get caught up with almost every movie that I wanted to finish up on, and I'm still catching up. But I got to the September 26th release for Killer Heat, which is the next movie, but in all seriousness, First Omen was an okay movie. It wasn't one of my favorites, but it was probably at the top of the list because it's better than the other ones that I'm going to be mentioning. Because the other ones are okay, and then we get down to the mass section later on. But this movie did have some critiques with how the story turned out, but it's kind of like when you think about this movie, it's like a demon possessing this woman or whatever, and she had the demon all along inside one of her kids or whatever. So it's like okay, but all other than that, the movie is okay. So that is my number 26 pick. Number 25 is ISS. It's a movie about them in space, and then something happens where they find out that they can't trust their own selves, and they have to uh, kind of report back to their what is it? Their command center or whatever, like one in Russia, uh, and all that. So basically, the movie was okay, but it wasn't great from what I watched. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little off in this video. I'm just making sure on what I watched is what I watched. But other than that, ISS is an okay film. Stars Ariana DeBose in this movie, and her performance was okay, but I think the movie was just like it came and went kind of stuff. So it's an okay watch. I guess check it out for yourself to see what you think of it. Number 24 is Omni Loop. This is a movie I watched last night, and I did do a review for it, so definitely go check out that review. I did this movie review last night. It took me a little bit to get finished with that movie. This was like almost 2 hours. But it was about Mary Louise Parker's character who has a black hole in her chest, and then apparently she says she's lived through the week already and knows how she dies. like the black hole kind of sucks her up. So it's kind of fucked up and sad in a way. The black hole that's in her chest. It's a sad way to go, to be honest. And it did have a lot of, like, it showed that she was trying to see if she can stop this thing and try to find a cure for it or whatever. But it turns out that she let it happen at the end of the movie. So she came to terms with her fate and accepted that she was going to die. So it was a sad ending, but this movie did have some heart to it from time to time, but the movie's performance was okay. So that's my number 24 pick. Number 23 is Ghostlight. Now, I did enjoy some of this movie, but the performance was a little okay. It's about this guy that's a construction worker at first, and then he does something that makes him lose his job, I guess, and then what happens is he stars in a play for the Romeo and Juliet play, and it goes well for a while. And there's some obstacles he had to struggle through just to get to where he's at towards the end of the film. The end of the film had some pretty emotional moments during the film, but it's an okay film for how it turned out. It's one of the ones at the top of the list that I kind of enjoyed in a way for the okay films. So, it's okay. Number 22 is Back to Black, the Amy Winehouse biography movie. This one was an okay film. I wasn't like a super fan of this film, but I think with how it turned out, it's alright for its performance. The girl that played Amy Winehouse in this film did a pretty good job with her performance, but it's just the way the movie turned out. It just felt like bland and generic, and it's like, yeah, I knew they were going to make a movie about this, but I didn't think it would be just okay. Thought there would be some moments where I'd enjoy it, but I felt there were some dud points during the film. Some moments where it kind of dulled out a bit during the movie, but it did have an interesting story for the 2 hours of a runtime. So I put this at my number 22 because that's a good spot for it to be at. Number 21 is Sometimes I Think About Dying. Sorry about the ding, the notification emails thing or whatever. My TikTok's blowing up. So, pretty much, it's not blowing up, it's just a notification about a certain user. But, yeah, Sometimes I Think About Dying is a movie with Daisy Ridley in it. And she plays as this office receptionist in a way, or she works in an office. Kind of lives the boring life, to be honest. And then she eventually, what she does is she thinks about dying in this film. And it's like, that's kind of sad, to be honest. But the movie's performance was okay, but it wasn't one of my favorite films of this year. That's why I put it on this list, because it's just okay. So, I don't really have much to say about it other than the fact that I did watch it in its entirety, and I thought the ending had some emotional moments from time to time, but it just was, it came and went, pretty much. Number 20 is Arcadian. Now, this is a movie that came out in late April. Well, mid-April, actually, to be quite honest. This movie's okay, too. Nicolas Cage's performance he's better in serious roles, but sometimes his performance can be like, he kind of overdoes it with his performance a little too much. But in this film, he made it an interesting watch. It made it an interesting watch, and he did do something at the end to save his kids. save his boys or whatever from getting killed by this certain thing that's trying to basically kill them and all that. So pretty much Arcadian is not a bad movie, but it's okay. It's an okay watch. I mean, check it out for yourself to see what you think of it. Number 19 is Hitman. Now, I think this movie was... I know a lot of people praise this movie, and I'm like, why? Because this movie's just okay. It's not one of the best films I've seen of 2024. I think, what's his name? Glenn Powell in this movie. His performance was kind of mediocre, to be honest. I just wasn't sure if this was the movie for me, because it just didn't appeal to me too much as a great movie. So this was a movie that came and went, and for what I watched, there were some entertaining moments from time to time, but it's the execution that was the thing with this almost 2-hour movie. So I wasn't feeling for it too much, but I mean, check it out for yourself, see what you think of it. Number 18 is Kung Fu Panda 4. Now, this one was an okay film. It's one of the weaker films of the Kung Fu Panda franchise. I have not seen the third one, so I can't form an opinion, but I've seen 1 and 2 and 4. So I gotta watch the third one, and then probably do a little ranking list for which one's the best. Because I personally think Kung Fu Panda 1 and 2 are the best from what I watched. 3, I don't know for sure, so I can't form an opinion on that. But this one was just okay. You don't see the other Dragon Warriors in this film, like Tigress and all that, until I think at the end of the film, to be honest. And it's just a shame, because this movie was... I don't know what it was, but this movie was just kind of almost a flop. It was just one of the weaker films I've seen of 2024. Not terrible, but just okay of a watch. So, I mean, there's a new chameleon or whatever that's Poe has to fight, Jack Black's character, the panda and all that. So Tai Long comes back, but only just to get his powers stolen. Then he goes back to this spirit realm later on at the very end of the film, because Chameleon gets beaten by Poe and all that. And the new Dragon Warrior comes into play because Poe has to give up being the Dragon Warrior and train a new Dragon Warrior, become the new Dragon Warrior's master. So that's the whole breakdown of the movie, and it's an okay film. I just wasn't sure if I was feeling for some of it, because most of the movie, with what I watched, I think Awkwafina in this film, as her character, she was bad for most of the time and like a thief or whatever, but then she eventually had a heart and turned on the chameleon at the end of the movie. And it's like, took you long enough. So, yeah. Not one of the best Kung Fu Panda movies, but it's on the okay to man list. Number 17 is Trap. This is a movie from M. Night Shyamalan. I think I don't know if it's his daughter or just M. Night Shyamalan that helped direct this movie, but from what I watched with this film was okay. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, this film, but it's just okay. It's basically they're at a concert for the longest time, and the dad apparently is a serial killer called the Butcher, and so they talk about who the Butcher is and all that, and then you find out who it really is until the end of the movie, because it gets revealed later on, because what they're trying to do is go up to the VIP section, and he just made up lies about his daughter, saying that she has like some form of cancer, and it's like, Yeah, he's trying to avoid getting arrested. So that was the whole background to the movie. But I think the movie was okay for the overall runtime. But it's some of the execution that was the weirdest thing about it. But that's just what I think. I mean, everyone else can form their own opinion to see what they think about it for themselves. But it's not a terrible movie. It's just okay for the runtime. The ending was a little weird, and then he just kind of gets out of his shackles at the end of it. Number 16 is Ghostbusters with Frozen Empire. This is another okay film. I just wasn't too much of a fan of this one. That's why I put it in the middle section of this list. Because the other performances were fine, but Phoebe kind of stood out in this film, not in a good way. She was trying to. She actually had like feelings for this ghost or whatever, as like someone she could really connect with or whatever. But pretty much towards the end, there's this new ghost that comes into town and just tries to terrorize New York City, and she basically lets this ghost free or whatever, this Egyptian ghost or whatever. It causes a frozen empire. And so, from what I gathered with this film, it's a little weaker than the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie. Because Afterlife was a good movie. It was one of my favorites of 2021, if I remember correctly. This one was a lot weaker. And not in a good way, but not in a terrible way. Just in the middle. It was okay. Number 15 is Sting. Now, this is a movie about a alien spider that apparently kind of grows very big and then starts eating people and killing people and like capturing them, then killing them. So, a lot of stuff that happens in this movie. At the beginning, it shows where the ending comes in, and then it eventually shows a few days earlier. Excuse my coughing. So I think this movie was okay, but the ending was kind of like, oh shit, they're gonna fucking die. It's like, why am I not surprised? The ending was kind of like, oh shit. But the overall performance of the movie was okay. So that's my number 15. Number 14 is Bob Marley, One Love. This film actually tried to be something interesting, but it felt almost like a dud, this film. It's just an okay dud, but I think the overall stuff that was shown in this movie, I don't think there was a lot that was explained in this movie. Like, they explained what they could, but they didn't get up to the point where he had some form of cancer or whatever at the end of the film. So, it just left out a few important details that I think should have been detailed in a way. So from what I watched, it's just okay. Number 13 is 1992, another okay film that I found to be like, meh, it's fine. But it's not one of my favorite films of this year. I think Tyrese Gibson's performance was solid, and the son's performance, his son in the movie, his performance is fairly average. But the other performances were just like meh to okay. And just the overall storyline about how it shows the Rodney King uh, riots and all that going on. And then you eventually come to the point where they're robbing this place and trying to steal gold. And then it doesn't work out in their favor. And it's like, oh, there's some predictability. They all get, the bad guys lose in the end, and the son and the dad get to walk away and just basically live their lives again, even though they had a fucked up night. So pretty much 1992 is an okay film. It's not one of my personal favorites, not one of the worst films I've seen of 2024. Number 12 is The Killer's Game, a kind of meh movie. I wasn't sure how I was feeling about this movie, but I just think the overall execution could have been a lot better, but this movie did have some good action scenes, but the overall story where Dave Bautista's character apparently, he finds out that he has some form of diagnosis that apparently is life-threatening and can kill him in the next few months. Something Jacob's disease. But other than that, he then eventually finds out that he was misdiagnosed and then he only needed glasses, and it's like, wow. It was like, this movie kind of copped out in a way with some of the performance, and he finally found out what they found out what the misdiagnosis was. Then he put a fucking hit on himself in the next 24 hours, and the hit already came to pass. And they said, you are going to live and all that. And he's like, what? It's like, oh shit, I fucked up. It's like, that was fucking stupid. The decision making there for the character's script and all that was stupid. So I think the movie's meh, but it's not one of my favorites. So that's why I put it at the top of the meh section, because it did have some good action scenes, and Scott Adkins was pretty much a badass in this film. Number 11 is Mean Girls. Now this is another film that I just was kind of meh about. It's not terrible, it's not great, but it's not one of my favorites that I've seen of 2024. It's just in the middle with me, and that's why I put it at 11, because it's not as bad as the other man movies that I'm going to be talking about, but it's kind of one of the weakest of this year. It's just in the middle with me. So it's a musical movie, and I was a little disappointed that it was a musical movie, and they did have some talking from time to time, but they mostly sung a lot. It's like, shut the fuck up already and get to your point. It's like, okay. I mean, I guess it works for the film in a way, but not in the best way. Number 10 is Red Right Hand, the Orlando Bloom movie. I think this movie was meh in its own way. Not one of my favorites of the year, but it's in the middle with me. I think the overall performance from Orlando Bloom was okay, and just the execution of the performance of the movie just had some stumbles from time to time, but the action scenes is where it landed very well on its mark and made me impressed with this movie from time to time. So I gave it a 6 out of 10 if I remember correctly. But that's where I stand with the film. And give me a second, I gotta pause the video real quick. Sorry, was dealing with a phone call from my pharmacy or whatever, so I am so sorry about that. I will probably get back to that phone call in a bit. I'm just basically trying to finish up on this video. So to finish where I left off, Orlando Bloom's Red Right Hand movie is a man movie. It's in my top 10, but it's not one of the worst of the year. Number 9 is Reunion. Now, I thought this movie was going to suck, because I was having some doubts about this movie, and I was finding it a little disappointing, but it's not one of the worst of the year, because you get to be interested in some of the characters, but the movie's performance is kind of meh. It's not one of the best films of the year, just in the middle. And I think overall, this movie with Nina Dobrev and Melvin something is his name. I can't remember his name, but he's the guy that figures out who the actual killer was of the guy that was hosting that party, like a high school reunion party, and then it just ended up where he got killed off and all that. So pretty much, I think this movie's meh, but it's not great. Number 8 is Never Let Go. Now this is a movie I recently watched with Halle Berry in it, and this movie is kind of on the meh side. It's not great, but it's not perfect. Like, there are some big critiques I have with this film to keep it where it's at a 6 out of 10. So, I think if you watched my movie review for it, I just think the overall storyline is kind of clustered and a little bit screwy with how they think it's an apocalyptic world, and then you find out it's really not, and there's an outside world out there, and they've been starving themselves for too damn long, thinking that I don't fucking know. This movie did have its problems, but the execution of the film and what the story was going for was just in the meh section, but it's not one of the best films I've seen. So that's why it made it in my top 10 at number 8. Number 7 is Roadhouse. Now, this is not the best Roadhouse remake, for sure. Patrick Swayze's Roadhouse is the way to go if you want to watch a good Roadhouse movie. This movie did have some good CGI moments, but the problem with this movie was Jake Gyllenhaal just didn't perform this movie very well. He didn't perform very well in this movie. Like, his performance was kind of mediocre, but there were some times where I just didn't feel for his performance. So this was a more serious tone to Roadhouse, and not in a good way, because it doesn't pay homage to the original too much. And that's the most disappointing part of it, because it tried to do something, but it ended up being like a man movie at the end of the year. So I watched it earlier this year, like June or so is when I watched it. So it's just meh. Number 6 is Atlas. This is another man movie that I watched during this year. Came out on May 24th. I think Jennifer Lopez's performance in it was kind of meh. But everything else about the movie did have some good moments. Like Simu Lee's character who's a AI robot, and who's a robot that turned bad. And then you find out that he was the cause of all of it or something like that. I don't know. But overall, the execution was kind of meh. Story had some good action scenes, but the problem with this movie was just certain execution points with the storyline and the script. Number 5 is The Instigators. This is a movie with Matt Damon and Casey Affleck in this movie. I think this movie just was meh. I thought Matt Damon's performance was kind of a little weak in this one. Casey Affleck at least tried with this performance, so it was decent of a performance. But some of the performances and just the overall script of the movie was kind of just like a throwaway movie on Apple TV that you watch one time and then you're like, okay, finished up, moving on. So it made it in the top 5, so it's kind of one of the weakest films of the mass section of the okay to man movies of 2024. That's why I put it at my number 5, because I think this movie didn't have too much potential, but it tried. Number 4 is Damsel. Now, this movie has grown a lot weaker as I uh, kind of remember the movie and kind of just am like, yeah, this wasn't one of the best films. This ain't the worst film of 2024, but it is very meh. And it could have been a lot better. I mean, Millie Bobby Brown's performance is solid, but the overall execution of this film and how it turned out for the final product did not land very well. So, I just think the ending to the film was like, okay, I know what to expect. This movie is very predictable, and you know what to expect with a movie like this. Like, it had an interesting trailer, but when you watch the whole movie in its entirety, it's like, okay, it's one of those movies that comes and goes during the year. That's what it was, a movie that you just watch one time, and it's like, alright, I'm gonna probably forget about this one. Number 3 is If. This is another man movie with Ryan Reynolds in it. I think this movie did have some heart to it from time to time, but the overall execution was the main thing that I wasn't feeling for with this film. So it was one of the mass movies of 2024. Not man movie of the year, but not the mass movie of the year, but it's in the top 5. And that's why you find out that Ryan Reynolds is an imaginary friend and at the very end of the film, and it's like, okay, so he was never real. So it just was in the girl's imagination, and it's like, yeah, this movie didn't do anything for me too much. It was just, it came and went. Number 2 is Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. This movie tried, but it just felt like almost a disappointment. It's not one of the mass movies of the year, but it is one of the runner-up to it, because I personally think this movie could have done better with Kevin Costner. His performance was strong, but for the 3 hours of a runtime, this movie did not have that much potential, and it felt like a snooze fest from time to time. It was trying with the action scenes, I'll give it praise there, but the movie was kind of just one of the runner-ups for the mass movies of 2024. That's why I put it at number 2, because it's on the weaker side of this list. And finally, at number 1, drum roll please, Civil War. This movie I am definitely selling, for sure, because I do not like this movie too much. I think it's one of the mass movies of the year. I think this movie had some good action scenes from time to time, but Kristen Dunst and just the overall performance of this movie was kind of just plain dull. This movie didn't do shit for me. It was one of the weakest movies of 2024. Not the worst, but one of the weakest man movies of 2024, and it made it as the mass movie of the year for 2024 at my number 1, because I don't really come back to this movie. I thought this movie was going to have potential, and I thought it was okay at the beginning when I watched it. When I watched some of it, it was starting off okay, and then once you get through the rest of the movie, it's kind of like, yeah, this movie didn't really do it for me. It was just a movie that happened. They had a budget for it. They wanted to make money out of this movie. It didn't land with the execution. It was just everyone's not cup of tea kind of movie. Just meh. So that was my number 1. This movie tried, but it didn't execute too well. So that's going to be it for the Okay to Man movies of 2024 video. I hope you enjoyed this almost 35-minute video. I am so sorry if there is some background noise. It's my mom's TV. She's watching a show on Amazon Prime. But overall, I just think this whole list that I broke down for you are the Okay to Man movies of 2024 that I've watched during 2024. And I will be doing some more updated ones if I do happen to come across some other Okay to Man movies. I'll probably do an honorable mentions of that during the year of 2025 because I don't know if I can get around to finishing it up at the end of the year, but I'll see what I can do. But until then, you guys have a good rest of your afternoon, and thank you guys for watching the Okay to Man movies of 2024 video. Have a good rest of your afternoon.